Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast, brought to you by Velocity 5 Restaurant and Bar in Sterling, Virginia. I'm your host, Rob Terranova. We've got another jam-packed episode for you this week. This is episode number 42 of the podcast. We'll be talking about the newest Yankee acquisition that's getting a lot of buzz, an injury scare to a top pitching prospect. As always, we'll discuss some hot stove rumors, and the start of spring training officially underway with pitchers and catchers reporting today. Really should be a holiday. But before we get to all that, let me introduce our panel for this week. Joining us from Scranton, Pennsylvania, our Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders beat reporter, Tommy Romanelli. What's going on, Tommy?
Not much, Rob. How's the San Diego weather?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's been in the low to mid 70s. It's felt a lot like San Diego. So no complaints here.
Very
and just want to give a shout out to you. You got a chance to enjoy the first ever Eagles Super Bowl parade.
Yes, and it was an incredible experience, and hopefully one that I'll get to experience again. But there's a lot of relief over me as an Eagles fan, so it was a good feeling.
That's great. That's great. Moving on now down to Charleston, South Carolina, to a guy who's enjoying weather like this just about every single day of the year. Our Charleston River Dogs beat writer, Joseph Dixon. What's going on, Joe?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just excited for this season to get started and then get things underway and ready to go.
I think we can all agree on that. And joining us from down in Tampa, Florida, where spring training is getting started, the man who knows the Yankee system inside and out, Mr. Paul Pagnato III. How's it going down there, Paul?
Doing great, Rob. How you doing?
Good. Very good.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. It's an honor to be here.
We are excited to have you and looking forward to your insight. But guys, like I said, we have so much to get to, so let's just dive right in. Let's start this episode with the headline that's been creating the most buzz in Yankee land this week. The Yankees acquired the rights to NFL quarterback Russell Wilson from the Texas Rangers. He is expected to report to Trenton. Guys, when you first heard of this, what do you make of this news? And does it make it a little better that Wilson always talked about dreaming about being a Yankee someday?
Well, I actually had the opportunity to see him play in college. He was drafted out of Colorado, out of NC State. He slashed 282, 384, 415 while he was a batter, and he had a 5.84 ERA in 12 innings pitched. Didn't play a bad second base. You said he's going to report to Trenton. He won't appear in a game though.
Right.
There's really not a marketing scam feel here for me. This is for the coaches, the players, and the front office to enjoy. It loosens the mood around camp, provides motivation, entertainment, just inspiration for the guys. I love the move, and he joins a long list of former NFL stars to join the Yankees, so it's kind of cool.
You just mentioned the former NFL players to be acquired by the Yankees. Just to throw a few of those names out there for those of you who forgot: Billy Cannon Jr., John Elway, Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, Drew Henson, and Brandon Whedon. So a nice little crop there of NFL players acquired by the Yankees. I'm going to toss this over to Tommy now. Tommy, bigger media draw, Tebow or Wilson?
I'm going to have to say Tim Tebow, only because he's actually playing games and he's a little bit more accessible. But, the Wilson acquisition is a cool storyline for spring training. For us baseball diehards, spring training is a great time and a lot of fun to watch. But for the average fan, it gives them a reason to tune in and see a popular name in the Yankees and, doing some cool things. So it's nice. It'll definitely draw some attention and be fun for the fans. So, I do think, though, that Tebow is definitely a bigger draw at this point just because of the enigma that he is.
Right. And actually contributing to the minor league team, hitting home runs. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. But like you said, the word that comes to mind is cool. It is definitely cool having Russell Wilson just associated with the Yankees organization. So looking forward to seeing him report to spring training and everything that goes along with that. But changing gears now to some news that actually will affect the Yankees organization. And Joe, I'm going to bring you in right here. Albert Abreu
So yes, Albert Abreu, he did have a bit of a setback. He had a problem with his appendix. He had to get an appendectomy. So it's nothing to do with his arm or any other kind of crucial part to his mechanics or his delivery or anything like that. So with an injury like that or an operation like that, it's typically like a 2-3 week stint on the DL. So Albert should be fine. It'll set him back a little bit, but it won't be a major hurdle for him, and he'll be able to pick up where he left off, and it shouldn't affect him long term. It'll just be smart for the Yankees to take their time with him and let him rehab and come back and go from there.
Paul, let's get you back in here. For those people watching and listening who don't know too much about Albert Abreu, what can you tell us?
So he's a great prospect, and he's on the 40-man roster. And, I think one of the bigger questions are, where is he going to start the year? Is it going to be Tampa? Is it going to be Trenton? I think, he only had 9 starts in Tampa with a 4+ ERA. He needs more time to work down there with Jose Rosado. I look for him to have, around a first half of a promotion type, maybe May, the earliest June being a safer bet. There's no need to rush him. He's extremely talented, young, just 22 years old. So just take your time with him and be extra cautious, especially after surgery. Having a week or two setback forces him to miss a week or two in spring training. Give him that extra time in extended spring training, and then roll him out there with Tampa. The newly minted Tampa Tarpons, and their uniforms were released. So be sure to check that out at tampatarpons.com.
And he is definitely a player to keep an eye on moving forward as this Yankees youth movement starts to take shape this season. And speaking of the Yankees youth movement and spring training starting today, pitchers and catchers officially reported. And like I said at the top of the podcast, I think it should be a national holiday. Baseball is back. Spring is right around the corner. So a really exciting time out there for Yankee fans and fans of all baseball. So this is going to be the first part of a 2-part series. The Yankees have 20 non-roster invitees invited to camp. So we're going to break down 10 of those now and then the other 10 next week. So be sure to tune into that on episode 43 of the podcast. So starting with the 10 non-roster invitees we're going to look into now, let's start with Danny Espinosa, a newly acquired Yankee who will be reporting to camp as an insurance policy if the young guys don't seem to be ready, the rookies don't seem to be ready to take over one of those infield spots. I want to bring Tommy back in here. Tommy, I know you were a big fan of this acquisition. What can you tell us about Danny Espinosa?
Yeah, well, Espinosa was a highly touted prospect with the Nationals a few years ago, and you're right. It was an acquisition that I liked because I think he will provide just enough of a veteran presence that if he's needed in the big leagues, he'll be able to be productive. With his little bit of power that he could produce and the left-handed stroke with the short porch, that will work out pretty well in Yankee Stadium. But the big thing with him is his defense. And if the Yankees aren't going to go with a rookie, I think they're going to prioritize defense at one of those 2 positions. That has always historically been something very important for the Yankees. So more so the last maybe 5 years. So I think that Espinosa has a real shot to make the roster. I wouldn't be surprised even if both the rookies end up taking the starting jobs if they carry both Torres and him just because of how good defense he could play. And you might even be able to get him into one of the corner outfield spots. But when you're thinking about the versatility of the roster, I think that the ability to put him in different positions and as a veteran presence for the rookie infielders, that'll be a really, really nice presence for him. However, my own personal opinion, I think that if none of the rookies win the starting job at second base or third base, even if only one wins, then what's going to happen with Espinosa is he'll be the utility man because Torres will probably be the starter. So I think that that's his clearest path to being on the Yankees. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen everybody, Glaber and Andujar or Wade take one of the spots and they don't carry an extra infielder, I would expect to be seeing a lot of Espinosa here in Scranton.
I would definitely have to agree with you on all of those points. It will be exciting to see how this whole thing shakes out. Moving on to our next non-roster invitee, bringing Paul back in. Paul, here is a young man that you know a lot about and you had the chance to see in the Futures game. Of course, I'm talking about Estevan Florial. So, Paul, can you tell us about Estevan?
Well, there's a lot to like about Estevan. We have him ranked as the number 2 Yankees prospect behind Gleyber Torres. I believe he's ticketed for Trenton, but he should be incredibly fun to watch during spring training this year. Think of him as last season's Gleyber Torres. He has an outside shot at playing in the bigs this season, but he could really force the issue with strong play. He's just one of those talented individuals where it's just such an impact player. If he plays well, he could really force the issue. You see that, from time to time. I really believe he's going to be a future all-star in the making, and he's an incredible young man. Got a level head on his shoulders, and really, really looking forward to watching him play and hit some triples and some doubles and watch that speed coming around the bases.
Tom, anything to add to that?
Well, I was just curious, Paul, since you did get to see Florial, a lot of the scouting reports that have come out this year about Gleyber Torres and Estevan Florial, Gleyber had his scouting reports say that he'll hit for some power, mostly be a average type hitter, with some pop and obviously be a really above average player. I've seen a lot of reports that say Florial has a chance to be a 5-tool player. So if you were to compare Florial where he is now and Gleyber where he was at Florial's level, who do you consider to be the better prospect at that point?
That's a fantastic question. I got to go with Gleyber. I think I just truly believe in Gleyber. I believe in his bat. I think he has the potential to be a Robinson Cano-esque type player at second base. And I know that's a big name to throw out there, but that's just what my gut tells me, and that's what my heart tells me. Florial, I kind of comp him to Adam Jones. So both of those guys are all-stars, but I prefer to have Cano over Adam Jones. But that's just me.
And moving on to number 3 on our list of 10 non-roster invitees that we're going to break down, Justus Sheffield. And, of course, he's ranked number 3 on Pinstriped Prospects Yankees prospect list. Joe, I want to bring you
So
in.
Justus Sheffield, he's ranked number 3 in our prospect rankings, of course. He's a very interesting prospect in that he has a fastball, and he's basically a fastball, and he has a very good slider. So he's a left-hander. He's 5'11", so he's not like a gigantic guy. He won't come at you in that way, but he has a very high ceiling. And unlike say somebody like Chance Adams, who has a little bit more polish, Sheffield will have a lot higher ceiling, and he projects, I would think, to be more like a 2 or 3 starter potentially in the future. So Justus Sheffield is definitely a pitcher to watch in spring training because he does have an outside shot as well to make the team out of spring training.
To another pitcher who will be reporting to camp, highly regarded, and has a really good chance of making his major league debut this season, Chance Adams. Tom?
Yeah, so Chance did have an amazing season last year, and as Joe alluded to, he was an extremely polished pitcher, probably one of the more polished pitchers in the Yankees organization. In terms of their prospects, of course. But he went 11-5 last year, and he had a sub-3 ERA, which was absolutely great. But the big question with Chance, he's not on the 40-man roster right now, so I don't see him having a realistic shot making the starting rotation out of spring training just because they're going to want to keep those options open. The one thing to watch for is, he's probably going to make his major league debut this year. The big question there is whether he makes it out of the bullpen or if he makes it out of the rotation. Now, obviously, you can never have enough starting pitchers, but the one thing about Adams is, he's got a good fastball and the control is outstanding. The control is probably what makes him as good of a prospect as he is right now, because he could paint both sides of the plates with all of his pitches, and he attacks the zone. When I got to talk to him, one thing that he mentioned was that he was able to attack the zone, not even just because he became a reliever, but he just doesn't want to give away any at-bats. He just wants to go right at the hitter, which is definitely something that you look for in a pitcher that is going to have some major league success. So when it comes to Adams, his secondary pitches are definitely a step above the rest, but he'll be the first to tell you that they definitely need some work. His curveball is one of his best secondary pitches. He definitely can rely on that to get some outs. It's his slider and his changeup that he could definitely improve. I think that going into 2018, his changeup is what he'll be focusing on the most, because I think out of all four of his pitches, that's the one that probably needs the most work. And for as amazing of a AAA season that he had this year, when I got the chance to talk to him, I asked him what his goal is going to season. He said, well, it's the goal's the same every year, to lead the league in strikeouts. So since he didn't do that this year, he considered it a down year. And, he still struck out 8 batters per inning. So I think that's okay. But as far as he goes, if the Yankees don't add another starting pitcher, I think that he'll 100% make his debut probably mid-season sometime. If they do add a starting pitcher, I think he'll still make his debut, but it might not be until the later part of the season. So I think that he has a chance to be, no pun intended, a Chad Green-esque type pitcher this year if he's going to make an impact at the big league level. And the reason why I say that is because he is a converted reliever, so he can come out of the bullpen no problem. His stuff probably plays a little bit better out of the bullpen as well. So I really think that he'll have the shot to make an impact this year. It just depends on how.
Paul, anything to add to that?
Yes. Now that you said coming out of the bullpen, I know the Yankees view him as a starter. However, Tommy, I completely agree with you, and I'd go as far as saying he would be a go-to guy out of the pen. Would you kind of compare him to, whether he'd be lights out like Chad Green, or do you think he'd be kind of more like an Adam Warren type? That's a question that I'd have for you. You've seen him more than me, but in what I've seen, I think he would be a go-to guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel like Chance, his stuff is going to play out of the bullpen well, and he can come in and get some big outs. And what I think is going to dictate his career is what happens with the Yankees and Dellin Betances, or if they lose a guy like Robertson after this season, to see what that bullpen actually looks like. I think he'll get his shot in the bullpen this year just to get his feet wet, and so the Yankees can see what he looks like out there. The one thing I will say, though, is I do think his secondary pitches are good enough that he could be a starter and be a productive starter. Will he be an ace? Probably not, but that doesn't mean he can't be a solid 3 starter. I think that his ceiling is probably borderline 3, maybe low end 2. So I can 100% see him being a starter, but I also believe what you said, that he could come in and be a shutdown reliever. So if they could sign Betances long-term, I think that they'll stick with the starter plan. But if they lose one of those big guys out of the pen, that might be the direction that you see them go with Chance.
And there's a report out there that says Brian Cashman believes if they need rotation help, he will be the first one called. So that it was part of the reason that Cashman didn't want to part with him in the Garrett Cole trade. So we'll see how that whole thing shakes out, if he's deserving, how he performs in spring training. So a lot of storylines there to follow. But as we continue our list of 10 non-roster invitees, already on number 5, Cody Carroll. And Paul, I want to bring you back in for this conversation. Cody Carroll, I know he's someone that you constantly rave about. So what can you share about Cody with us?
Well, Rob, we had Cody as our 21st ranked prospect on PinstripeProspects.com. Carroll kept opposing hitters to 212 batting average against in 47 and a third innings of work while collecting 59 strikeouts. Carroll made 13 opportunities for the Tampa Yankees and converted 2 of 3 save opportunities with the team. He was then promoted to the Trenton Thunder, where he appeared in 26 games. He went 5 for 9 in save situations, but don't look at that as a huge negative. He pitched very, very well. He made one of the biggest jumps in baseball with ease. He was able to keep his ERA at a low 2.66. Carroll's best weapon is his fastball, which can top out at 99, almost touching 100, and consistently hits 95 to 98 miles an hour. He accompanies his pitch with a slider and a splitter, which are rated 60 and 40 respectively on MLBpipeline.com. So he's a fastball slider guy with an average splitter. The slider is on MLB.com ranked a 60 grade out of the 20 to 80 scale, and the splitter is a 40 on like I said, on MLBpipeline.com. So the fastball slider type pitcher with a plus fastball.
Great. And our next non-roster invitee, Kale Koshaw. Joe, let's get you back in here. Kale Koshaw ranked number 69 in the Pinstripe.
So Kale Koshaw, it's the first thing that'll hit you when you see him is that he's a big kid and he throws very hard. Now the problem is sometimes with his command. Last year he pitched mostly at Trenton. He did pitch a bit at Scranton, but his walks per 9 innings at Trenton were 3.6 walks per 9 innings, and that's coming from the fact where he struggles with the command on his slider. He has an electric fastball. It tops out in the upper 90s, but it usually sits in the mid 90s, 93, 94, 95, somewhere in that range. But he struggles with the command on his slider, and that's what gets him into trouble. So he's an interesting prospect. He's coming along as far as command on that slider, but he still has some work to do before he becomes an effective pitcher out of the bullpen.
Anything to add to that, Paul?
No, I think Joe nailed it on the head, especially at the very end. I had Kale at multiple levels throughout my time with the Yankees, and I love the kid, but I don't see him making his MLB debut at all this season.
Paul, let's stay with you as we get to number 7 on our list of 10 non-roster invitees that we are discussing on this episode of the podcast. Dylan Tate, number 12 on the Pinstripe Prospects prospect list. What do you know about Dylan?
Well, Dylan Tate has a plus grade fastball that will sit at 96, 97 miles an hour. He's topped out at 98 in the past. He carries a put-away slider that he can move across the plate while sitting in that 86 to 88 mile per hour range. While his fastball is lethal, he spent a lot of time working on the placement of this past season with his slider. Tate's slider is more clear cut, and it's considered also a plus grade pitch. His third option is a changeup, which will be his primary thing to watch in 2018 as far as his progression. After a full year of grooming from the Yankees, Tate had his best year yet, starting with the Tampa Yankees in High A, then finishing his season in Double-A Trenton. Between the two, he posted a career-best 2.81 ERA after 83 and a third innings pitched, which was another career high. In those 83 innings, he gave, or 83-plus innings, he gave up 26 earned runs, only 26 earned runs, only 24 walks, only 7 home runs, and struck out 63, finishing with a career-low 1.14 WHIP. To note, the Yankees acquired Dylan Tate back in the trade deadline of 2016 when we had the infamous sell, and he was acquired for Carlos Beltran from the Texas Rangers. The funny thing about the Rangers is they changed his delivery from when he was initially a top prospect, and the Yankees had revert him back to his original form. And his passion and his competitive desire really reemerged him as a top prospect. Something to view on pinstripeprospects.com is a scouting report by Antonio Mendez that was just published, I believe, last week. To be completely honest, I differ from Antonio's opinion, but that's okay. And, it's funny in baseball, you could be right 40 or 1 out of 40, 49 or 50 times, fortunately for my state, my claim to fame, I picked Aaron Judge back when he was in High A Tampa to be a future All-Star. So pretty happy with that one. So it means I got 49 other misses, and maybe Dylan Tate will be one of those. But Antonio thinks he's going to be a starter. I would highly recommend checking out his scouting report. If you go on our top 75 prospect list, you can also view his player profile. So two great data points to view Dylan Tate. I think he's going to be a name and a force to be reckoned with in the future. I think it's going to be out of the bullpen, though. That delivery, the secondary pitches just aren't there. He is still young, but he's one of those players that I really just see being a bullpen arm and a very good one at that.
As we get now to number 8, Taylor Widener. Tommy, why don't you jump back in here?
So Taylor Widener is the number 15 pitcher on the Pinstriped Prospects top 75 rankings, and he's definitely a guy that's been popping up on a lot of Yankee top 30 lists. So right-handed thrower, and he throws really hard. He actually probably closer to the low 90s, but his bread and butter pitch is the slider. I believe it was actually, according to Paul there, he has one of the best spin rates in the entire minor leagues. So, that's definitely that fastball slider combo that you see a lot in the Yankees system in terms of pitching goes. So he's a guy with great control. He doesn't walk too many batters, and he could easily work both sides of the plate. When there's a pitcher that's young like that, that's something that you really look for. So I think that's really important for him moving forward. I think he's a guy that could surface, maybe another guy to come out of the bullpen for the Yankees with that good control and the slider. But he's definitely going to be trying to develop another pitch. His third pitch would be a changeup. So if that would be absolutely something to keep an eye on this year to see if he can develop that third pitch. If he can, then that absolutely could really change the way that he pitches and set batters up. So I really expect good things out of him this year, and I believe we also expect him to start the year in AA.
Now we move to a guy who is a recent acquisition of the Yankees. Joe, I'm going to bring you back in here. I know you've been antsy to talk about him. Jase Peterson just got him from the Braves.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Jase, and the good thing about Jase is that he's very versatile. He's played basically everywhere except for pitcher and catcher. He's had 18 starts in left, 9 at second, 5 each at third base and first base, and then 3 at short, and then 1 in right field. So he's basically been all over the place. He's very versatile. He could factor into the Yankees' plans if somebody gets hurt. They need a guy for a week or two, but I see him more as a guy who'll be in Scranton most of the year, and a guy who's versatile, but he does struggle to play. He has a .234 career batting average, and last year with the Braves, he had a career low as far as hitting .215 with only 2 home runs and 17 runs batted in 89 games with the Braves. So he's a guy that you might see him, kind of like you saw Tyler Wade a little bit last year, come up in a support role. But he'll be at Scranton, I think, most of the year, and then we may see him from time to time.
Paul, anything to add to that?
So the only thing I'd add, I think Joe did a pretty good job. He's just versatile, and his biggest competition is going to be Tyler Wade. I believe it's going to be Wade or Peterson on the roster, or Danny Espinosa as well. He made 18 starts in left field, 9 starts at second base, 5 each at third base and first base, and 3 at shortstop, and 1 in right field. So that was a mouthful there. Going off of what Joe said, he's incredibly versatile.
And Tommy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really expect Jase to be in the same role that Ruben Tejada was for the Yankees last year, and just that veteran presence to help mentor the guys here at Scranton and also be some depth. I think he's behind Danny Espinosa on the roster and on the depth chart. So I think that a lot is going to have to go wrong for him to come up. But you never know. Again, I think that he'll play that Ruben Tejada role and just basically spend his year at AAA unless he opts out of his deal, which I believe he can do in June, if I'm not mistaken. I think he has one right at the end of spring training and sometime in June.
All right, Tommy, why don't we stay with you? Why don't you bring us home? The 10th non-roster invitee we're going to discuss in this episode of the podcast, a name that's just fun to say, Wade LeBlanc.
Yeah, it makes me want to try out some French food. But I think he's another name that I'm probably going to get to be buddies with here in Scranton. He'll be able to give them spot starts. Now, he does have a chance, I guess, better than most of these guys to make the bullpen as either the long reliever or the left-handed reliever out of the bullpen. But honestly, I expect them to want him to be stretched out and be here in the minors, ready to make a start if they need him. So he's another guy with an opt-out in the middle of the season that, if he's pitching well, maybe another team might want to take a chance on him. But I think ultimately, when it comes time for a spot starter, you're going to see a guy like Chance Adams or Domingo German come up and just they'll take that spot before LeBlanc, unless it's a crazy situation like a doubleheader or something. So I do expect him to be at Scranton the entire time. However, it'll be interesting to watch and see if he can make the team out of the bullpen. But that does actually bring me to an interesting point that the Yankees, for the first time last year and this year, really, for as long as I've known the team, not concerned about having a left-handed arm in the bullpen. They're so comfortable with just it being all righties out there. And normally you would see them go out and get a huge left-handed, power reliever to do those matchups. But their confidence in the guys that they have right now speaks volumes, because I don't think they care if they have a lefty in the pen or not.
Paul, why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, I did find that interesting as well about the lefty in the pen situation, because I don't think Jason Shreve is their best option out of the pen to win a job, and I don't think Wade LeBlanc is either. You look at their splits, and getting into statistical analysis here, LeBlanc was opposing hitters hit 295 against him that were left-handed, and 217 against him that were right-handed. So he had reverse splits. So that doesn't bode well for him, especially being the lefty out of the pen. I think you're just starting to see guys that can get lefties and righties out. We have guys like Chad Green, it might be a Chance Adams, and Adam Warren, David Robertson, Dylan Betances, Aroldis Chapman, that they really can get both lefties and righties out, no longer needing to play matchups. And, I think this is one of the things that the front office clashed on, and, with Joe Girardi, and might be one of the reasons why he's not there anymore.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But the other thing to take note of is if you think about the guys who are absolute locks going into the season this year, you got Chapman, Kahnle, Betances, Robertson, Chad Green, and Adam Warren. So realistically, there's only one spot open in the bullpen, because generally throughout the season, you'll carry plus or minus one, but it's around 7. So I expect that role to go to the Scranton Shuttle and just have guys coming up and down all year. So I don't see them wasting one of those spots on a guy like LeBlanc, who chances are probably won't be able to stick around in the big leagues all year.
Completely agree. And one of the guys that I would put in there, and it's kind of a dark horse and people can't forget about, is Jonathan Holder. I mean, this guy has the potential to be really, really good. You saw him firsthand. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that Holder did a really good job last year when he came up. I think that the stuff is there. He just needs to put it all together at the big league level. So I think you're right. It's not a guy you could sleep on. He's got a big arm. The other one that I would actually keep an eye on is Ben Heller, because he's come up with the Yankees, and last year he actually had a pretty good season in the big leagues. So I think he's ready this year to make that next step and be able to consistently be in that bullpen. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him take that job early and keep it just because he's pitching well. Now, he might go up and down 1 or 2 times just because he's got those options available. But, I mean, he's a name that, has the stats to show that he's ready and the stuff to do it. And also, I've been saying this since the Rule 5 draft, don't sleep on JP Fireisen. So there's a ton of names out there just to fill that void. So a guy like LeBlanc, I just really can't see them wasting their time on in the bullpen.
Well, great stuff there, guys, and there you have it. The first 10 of 20 spring training non-roster invitees. Don't forget to tune in next week for the remaining players on that list. And guys, we've got some hot stove news to get to. But before we do that, here is an important word from one of our sponsors. Attention cancer victims. If you or a loved one lived, worked, or visited Lower Manhattan in the months after the 9/11 attacks and have been diagnosed with cancer, federal benefits and health care may be available. Attorney Eddie Markowitz has helped many families recover substantial benefits from the September 11th Victims Compensation Fund. The James Zadroga Health and Compensation Act has been extended, but time is limited. Attorney Markowitz is proud to serve as counsel to the Zadroga family, so let him help you too. These benefits are not just for rescue workers, but to anyone who qualifies. The fund covers many cancers, including prostate, skin, lung, and breast. Please call 1-833-LAW-4040. That's 1-833-LAW-4040 to see if you qualify. So like I said, some hot stove news. Looks like the first big domino finally fell. And that, of course, is Yu Darvish going to the Cubs. Joel, I want to bring you back in here. What does this mean for the free agent market in the freeze? And what was your first reaction to the contract that Darvish got?
I was a little surprised that I think he got 6 years, 125 million, which was a lot of money considering his age and his injury history. So I was a little bit shocked at the length of the contract and how much he got. I think he's a very accomplished pitcher, but I'm glad the Yankees didn't go to that extreme because again, we have some guys coming up through the system who will be able to, fit the role more economically, so to speak. So I was a little surprised at the amount he got, but it's not a bad move for the Cubs. But with the way the Yankees are looking, a couple of guys now popped up here: Jake Odorizzi from Tampa, and then Lance Lynn from the Cardinals have been mentioned by several sources as potential targets to the Yankees now, and both are decent targets because they have proven themselves in the major leagues, and they're especially Odorizzi. He's fairly young. He's only 28 yet, so he's an interesting prospect. And Lenz, he's got a little bit more experience. He's 30 years old, so it'll be interesting because with Len, for example, he's 30 years old and he's had Tommy John surgery. He missed all of 2016 with that. So that's something to look out for. Odorizzi has had injuries, but they've all been kind of freakish kind of things. He had a hamstring injury last April, line drive off his foot last year, and then he had some knee stiffness in his last start with Tampa last year. So even though he's had injuries, he's a very intriguing prospect because he's had success, and he's still young. So he would be a guy that I could see would make more sense than, say, a Lance Lynn or Yu Darvish, even because of his age and his wear and tear.
Tommy, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, honestly, and maybe I'm alone in this, but I really don't want to see the Yankees go out and sign anybody else. I'm actually kind of happy that they didn't get Darvish just because of what dynamic that would have brought to the roster and their flexibility. And don't get me wrong, the talent's out of this world. He would have improved the rotation millions. But the neck injury that he had in the past is concerning to me because as he gets older, I'm sure that that's not going to get any easier on him. And I think that it's time to allow the guys that they've worked so hard to build up in the farm system get their shot this year. I think that with guys like Andujar and Glaber and whoever, the other prospects, they are good enough to fit the void there. Just in terms of talent, and even if they have their struggles, the rest of the lineup is going to be solid. I also think that we completely look past that Domingo Acevedo ready to go. You have Chance Adams ready to go. Albert Abreu is not that far. Justus Sheffield's not that far. And those are just the guys towards the top of the organization. So, and not to mention that you have 5 solid starters already. So I would really hate at this point to see them sign a guy to a 4-year deal, 5-year deal, and end up not blocking those guys so we don't even get to see what, is out there in terms of their talent level and actually how that translates to the major leagues. I think it's time to see what they have and go from there. But I don't see the sense in locking yourself up like that at this point.
And guys, we mentioned this a few times. The official start of spring training, pitchers and catchers reporting today. That also meant the first opening day of spring training press conference for Aaron Boone. Paul, I want you to take us home on this. You wrote a good story that was on the website today, pinstripeprospects.com, about 10 takeaways from Aaron Boone's first spring training press conference. What was your reaction? What did you think watching the press conference? What was the good, the bad, and the ugly?
So there was no bad and there was no ugly. It was all sunshine and rainbows. Aaron Boone passed this, in my opinion, with flying colors, and he is ready for this job, or appears to be ready for this job. I really like the fact that he's going to have a loose atmosphere. I really like the fact that he buys into analytics and he buys into individuality. And knowing that each guy is different, and I think the coaching staff, they handpicked, with the exception of Larry Rothschild, but from the way Boone made it sound, I think his word was he was at ease after he found out that Larry was on his staff already, and he was looking forward to working with Larry because of his prior manager experience. For those of you who don't know, he was the first manager of the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's been a long-time pitching coach. He was with the Chicago Cubs for a while, and now he's been with the Yankees for quite some time. So, Larry's just an unbelievable coach. I think he's just got a great staff with him, and it'll allow him to connect with his players and connect with the front office. I think that's going to be the biggest development that we're going to see. He kind of subtly hinted at, everything wasn't in I form. It was a we form. I believe that we form was Brian Cashman, his staff, and, it's just very, very interesting. I think, Cashman found the right guy for the direction that the Yankees wanted to go in. Our very own Matt Cardos tweeted out Cashman is one of the brightest baseball minds he's ever been around, or the brightest baseball mind he's ever been around. And, to question him would be foolish. And the Yankees and the Steinbrenner family put the resources into the analytics I was a video guy, from that level on up to their internal database. Just everything is head over heels. Fantastic. You have all the resources that you can possibly need and want. And I think having Aaron Boone as a manager and being the communicator that he is, he's going to be that liaison between the front office and the players. And I think this will help in a number of ways that we won't even think of, because he is going to be such a good communicator. I think when it comes time to contract negotiations, or, having that open door policy when somebody's upset, Aaron's going to be there and have the guys back, but at the same time still, really have, Brian Cashman in his ear and the interests of the Yankees front office in his mind, and be able to provide good feedback for his players. So I think this was the right move to bring Aaron in. I think the media, he's going to handle that and pass everything with flying colors. It was no secret that Joe Girardi kind of got tired of dealing with the media at times, especially during rough patches. So I think you're going to see a much more relaxed Yankees clubhouse.
Anything to add to that, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. Watching that press conference earlier, the thing that I liked about Boone was that he wants his players to embrace the challenge, and he wants the pressure, and he doesn't want the players to feel the pressure, but he wants them to embrace the challenge and be ready to go as far as when the season starts. There's going to be a lot of craziness around, but that's expected with New York, and in order to succeed in this level, they're going to have to embrace that. And if there weren't such attention to them, then that means then there wouldn't be that excitement around camp, and there wouldn't be that interest. So he wants his players to accept that, to fully embrace that, and get accustomed to that, because that's going to be around, especially if they're winning like everyone thinks they will. So he wants players to adjust to that. He also talked a little bit about when Joe Torre was around and how accommodating he was. So he seems more like a kind of like a mix between Girardi and Torre in a way, in that I think he's going to embrace the analytics, but he's also going to be a more open manager to his players, which was the knock on Girardi last year with some of the younger players, especially, whereas they didn't know how to approach him, or they didn't feel comfortable approaching him, as some of the reports have said. So Robin Ventura is going to be the complete opposite of that, and he's going to embrace the analytics on top of that. So it was a very impressive press conference, and it's going to be very intriguing to see how he handles losing streaks and things like that as they come along.
I just need to correct you real quick. Did you say Robin Ventura?
Yes, I did. I didn't mean
Aaron Boone. Aaron Boone, not Robin Ventura. Aaron Boone.
Aaron Boone, boy.
He's doing a good job with the White Sox, so.
Yeah, that's right. No,
Yeah,
wow, Aaron Boone. Wow, wrong third baseman in my head.
Well, you know what?
It was worth 19 though, I think. So.
Well, you know what, guys? I think that's our cue, because that's going to do it for this 42nd edition of the Pinstriped Prospects Podcast, brought to you by Velocity 5 Sports Restaurant and Bar in Sterling, Virginia. Don't forget, if you have anything you would like to hear discussed on this podcast, feel free to reach out to us at any time. You can contact our managing partner and executive producer of the podcast, Mr. Robert Pimsner, at rob@pinstripeprospects.com, or reach out to me directly, rterranova@pinstripeprospects.com. Also, don't forget to follow us all over social media. You can find Pinstripe Prospects on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we ask, please, subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or the Google Play Store. And if you feel inclined to do so, and we hope you do, please give us that ever-important 5-star rating. So, for Joseph Dixon, Tommy Romanelli, Paul Pagnato III, and our man behind the camera, Mr. Robert Pimsner, I'm Rob Terranova. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pinstripe Prospects Podcast, and we look forward to checking in with you again next week. Until then, we are gone. We're out of here.